On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, give this person your place. And then in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or sisters or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. Tables are never neutral. Every table tells you who's important and who isn't, who belongs and who doesn't. There's something about wedding receptions that brings out our deepest anxieties about belonging. Sometimes there's a seating chart for all those tables, which can be awkward enough in and of itself. But worse yet is when there's no seating chart. And suddenly the room just feels enormous. You're standing there scanning the tables, trying not to look desperate. Where do I go? Who do I sit with? You don't want to sit too close to the front. That's presumptuous. But you don't want to sit too far back in the back either, because that feels like you've been left out. It feels like a high school lunchroom all over again. Because tables are never neutral. Because tables carry meaning, and they tell us where we fit. And sometimes they remind us that we don't. Today, Jesus walks into exactly that kind of dinner party, the no seating chart. People are scrambling. All of the unspoken rules of who belongs are suddenly visible. And the dinner party that Jesus attends isn't just any social gathering. It's a Sabbath banquet at a prominent Pharisee's house. The kind of event where reputations are made or broken, where social hierarchies are put on full display. In first century Palestine, banquets weren't casual affairs. They were almost theater. Every detail carried meaning: who got invited, where people sat, what was served, and in what order. The closer you sat to the host, the more honor you received in the eyes of everyone present. And Jesus watches this whole performance unfold. He sees distinguished guests calculating their moves, eyeing the best seats, jockeying for position like players in some elaborate social chess match. These weren't people just looking for good conversation or good fellowship. They were hunting for status. The seating arrangement was a way of declaring who mattered and who didn't, who was worthy of honor and who wasn't, who belonged in the inner circle and who got pushed out to the margins. This hospitality is a transaction. This isn't a community, it's a competition. Jesus saw through this whole charade. Here are these people with their pecking order, and they had turned the table, that ancient symbol of fellowship and shared life. They had turned the table into some sort of sorting machine that ranked human beings by their social value. A dinner party about exclusion and transaction, a table where grace depended on what you could give back, a table where some people mattered more than others, and everyone knew exactly where they stood in the hierarchy. The very idea of hospitality had been corrupted into a system of social accounting. Now, we might be tempted to wag our fingers at the first century dinner guests and their obvious status seeking. How crude, we might think. How transparent their scrambling for honor. But before we get too comfortable in our moral superiority, maybe we should ask, have our tables, real and proverbial, really changed all that much in 2,000 years? Our tables today still work as sorting machines. We've just gotten more sophisticated about it. Think about that wedding reception again. Even with a seating chart, someone made decisions about who sits where. The bride's college roommate at table 3, the groom's coworker at table 8, and luckily, crazy Uncle Bob is strategically placed in the back. Every table assignment carries a message about relationship, importance, inclusion. Our world makes seating charts in 1,000 other ways as well. We may not use little cardboard cards with our names printed on it, but we still sort people. Who gets invited into the circles of power and who gets left out? Who gets a place at the decision-making table and who's told their voice doesn't count? Who finds a welcome and who gets shut out? And we don't have very far to look very far to see it. Immigrants and refugees often find the welcome mat pulled out from underneath them. Come in, we say, the right way, of course. Become productive members of society, we say that. And even when that happens, we round them up and send them to a country they aren't even from. People who live in poverty are treated as problems to be managed, not neighbors to be embraced. We want to drug test people applying for food stamps, but not people applying for farm subsidies. It costs more for the National Guard to come in and remove unhoused people than it would to just house them. And yet, this is our solution. The elderly and the disabled are too often left out of the picture entirely. Even children sometimes get the message that the table is only for the grown-ups. Exclusion is alive and well. The names have changed, but the game is the same. We've turned hospitality into a marketplace, just like they did. We've just learned to hide it better. Well, maybe. And Jesus looks at these power dynamics, whether it's jockeying for seats at a Pharisee's table or the way we structure our entire society, and he flips the script completely. And he tells them a story. Well, he tells them two stories, really, and both of them flip the script completely. First, he says to the guests, when you're invited to a wedding banquet, don't rush to the best seat, take the lowest place instead. Because when the host sees you there, they might just say, friend, move up higher and everyone will see your honor. And then he goes on, but if you grab the best seat right away, you might hear those dreaded words, give this person your seat. And you'll have to slink away in shame to whatever's left. And then he turns to the host. When you give a banquet, don't just invite your friends, your family, your rich neighbors, the people who can invite you back. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, the people who can't repay you, the people who have nothing left to offer you in return. And if we're not looking for it, We can think Jesus here is just reminding us to be aware of good manners, reminding us of our reading from Proverbs today. These pieces of advice could easily be written into a Dear Abby advice column in the local newspaper. But if that's all this is, if this is all just good advice, I don't need any of it. I don't need this. I don't need or want Jesus to tell me to practice fake humility to be noticed. Thank God, Jesus isn't talking about better manners. He's talking about a complete reordering of how community works. He's describing the upside-down kingdom of God, where the last are first, where the humble are exalted, where grace flows toward, not away, toward those who can't earn it. In God's kingdom, the table doesn't belong to those who can afford the best guest list or secure the most prestigious seating. The table belongs to God. The table belongs to God. And thank God that God's seating chart looks nothing like ours. God honors the humble not because humility is some nice virtue, but because humility recognizes a truth. We're all guests at somebody else's table. Not one of us earned our seat. None of us deserve our place. We're all here by grace, by the sheer generosity of a host who welcomes us, not for what we bring, but simply because the host, that divine host, determined we belong. And that, my friends, changes everything. And I do mean everything. When you realize you're a guest, even a long-time familiar guest, you stop scrambling for that best seat. You stop calculating what you can get in return. You start looking around for other people who might need a place because you remember what it felt like to need one yourself. Jesus isn't critiquing their dinner party etiquette. He's revealing God's heart. A God who sets a table where worth isn't earned, where honor goes to the humble, where the invitation goes out to everyone, especially those who thought they'd never get one. The kingdom banquet has a very different seating chart. And the host has been looking for us the entire time. So I grew up in a family where both of my parents were one of 6 children. So that meant holidays were loud, crowded affairs centered around food and a large table in the kitchen. We used to joke that we'd be planning dinner while eating breakfast. And in our house, dinner was at noon. My dad always said if he invited you for dinner and you showed up at 5 p.m., you were 5 hours too late. That large table was the centerpiece of both grandparents' kitchens and was always packed. But when it was just my dad's family or maybe 1 or 2 of my aunts and uncles' families, there was always room for everyone at the table. And Grandpa always made sure to have one of us grandchildren sit right next to him. That spot was reserved for a grandkid, and we all thought it was special. And Grandma always made sure she always had a glass of milk for each of the grandkids, and especially if you were sitting next to Grandpa. Now, Grandpa always had coffee at the meal, and if you were next to Grandpa, he would reach over, probably give you a wink as he was doing it, and took that glass of milk and poured a little bit of it into your coffee. And he always made you feel special when he did it, too. You never minded missing some of your milk because you always felt special sitting next to Grandpa. Now, looking back, I realized my grandparents were practicing kingdom hospitality. There was always a place at their table, always room for one more, or more than one. The special moments, like sitting next to Grandpa, weren't earned through status or hierarchy. They were just gifts of grace, making each grandchild feel beloved in their own turn. Because here's what Jesus understood that we keep forgetting. Hospitality isn't about having the nicest house or the best food or the most impressive guest list. Hospitality is about making space. It's about saying to another human being, you matter, you belong. Saying to another human being, there's room for you here. And the most radical part, we don't do it because we're such good people. We do it because we've experienced it ourselves. Because someone, ultimately Christ himself, looked at us when we were standing there with our plate, scanning the room, wondering if we belonged, and said, come sit here. I've been saving a place for you. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said that what holds a community of faith together isn't common interest or shared identities. It's Christ alone. Because Christ holds us together. And for that reason, we can let go of unspoken qualifications for belonging. We can sit with strangers. We can welcome people who can't repay us. We can even make room for our enemies because the host has made room for us. Every Sunday, when we come to Christ's table, we step into that reality. Rich and poor, young and old, long-time members and first-time visitors, we all open our hands and receive the bread and the cup and remember that we belong. We all come forward empty-handed. Nobody earns their place. The host, Jesus Christ himself, simply says to us, this is my body given for you. This is my blood shed for you. This meal is a foretaste of the feast to come. And I suspect that when we finally reach that heavenly banquet, we're going to be surprised by the seating arrangements. And the host, Jesus himself, will look at us all with that familiar smile and say, I've been saving a place for you. Now let me introduce you to your dinner companions. So as you leave this place and go out into the world, here's your assignment for the week. When you sit down at a table, any table, whether it's supper at home, coffee with a friend, or lunch at work, ask yourself this question. If Christ is the host here, who would he want me to notice? Who would he want me to welcome? Who would he want me to sit beside? Because tables are never neutral. Every table tells us who's important and who isn't. When Christ is the host, the last are lifted. When Christ is the host, the excluded are invited. When Christ is the host, the stranger is made family. When Christ is the host, the poor are cherished, the weak are strengthened, the overlooked are celebrated. Christ is the host. And grace is the only seating chart that matters. Hear the gospel. Amen.